Welcome to Season 1, Episode 23, PuckHeads Insider Report. My name is Ed Combs. I'm here in South Florida. My co-host, Peter South, he's up in Windsor, Ontario. If you like our show, please click like. Please click subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You got questions on your favorite team? Send them off to us, puckheadsinsider@gmail.com. Hit us up on our Facebook page, PuckHeads Insider Report. Today's show is brought to you by the Florida Grow House. Have you ever thought of your own greenhouse? Well, here is your chance to get one. Have your own healthy, organic, fresh, and delicious fruits and vegetables. It's fun, it's relaxing, and it's money-saving food in your own backyard. Just go to floridagrowhouse.com. Give them a call, 772-249-2095. Mention you heard this ad on Puckhead's Insider Report. Get yourself a $750 discount. Peter, we've got a ton of stuff to get to today. We've got the NCAA Frozen Four. We're going to wrap that up. We're going to discuss the trade deadline. So many things to talk about today. How are things up in the Great White North, my friend?
Not too bad, Ed. It's a little chilly right now. I mean, it's in the 40s and 50s, so nice weather is on the horizon, and which means playoffs will eventually be in the air.
Something I'm very excited for is the NHL playoffs. Something that was super exciting, NCAA Frozen Four. Let's do a recap. 2021 NCAA men's hockey season wrapped up this past weekend. University of Massachusetts defeats St. Cloud in the final of the Frozen Four. 5-0 victory Saturday night. You had a 75% chance a Minnesota team was going to win. Boy, I wonder who took that bet. In a season that has seen the different conferences handle COVID in different manners, with some schools within those conferences opting not to play at all. There's definitely been an asterisk in the record books. Peter, how bad was it because of the schools that couldn't play? The Notre Dames, the Michigans. What does it take away from what the Frozen Four could have been, should have been with COVID this year?
I think it took away a fair bit. Like I said, Hockey East, for the most part, didn't even participate. You know, the Big Ten did play. And, of course, as we know, Notre Dame and Michigan got knocked out because of COVID, as did St. Lawrence University at the beginning. So, I mean, it played a part. There's no doubt. It played a big part in it, and that's why, like you said, there's definitely going to be an asterisk in the record books for this season.
I don't want to take away from what St. Cloud State and University of Massachusetts did to get to where they were. They earned it. They deserve it. UMass wins, and they deserve. They did a massive victory, 5-0. But the asterisk, what was taken away? What did the fans miss by these big schools not being there?
Well, there was a wealth of talent in the league this year. I mean, the fans missed out on seeing nationwide, seeing the University of Michigan's freshman class, probably one of the best of all times. That freshman class. I mean, they accounted for, I think it was over 60% of the scoring from the University of Michigan throughout the year. And that's huge. And they're exciting to watch too. Just one team. I mean, there's a lot of players who were seniors who are going to move on to the NHL. Hobie Baker winner Cole Caulfield was missed by a lot of people this year, especially fans in Wisconsin. You know, they couldn't fill up the rinks there and all that. So there's a lot of great stories, great players, and great games that were missed because of COVID.
Well, let's not take away anything from the guys and the teams that did participate. So let's start off with the semifinals of the Frozen Four. They took place Thursday night, and in the first game, St. Cloud scored with just under a minute left in the third period to take a 5-4 comeback decision from Minnesota State. Very disappointing on my part because that's who I picked to win the whole shebang. Second game, UMass took Minnesota Duluth. Now, despite being outshot after 3 periods by the Bulldogs, 36-15, managed to go into overtime, even at 2. In the overtime, it looked like the teams traded sweaters as UMass took it to Minnesota Duluth, and on their 13th shot of the first overtime, notched the winner to take them to Saturday's final. Now, it's worth noting UMass went into the game without 4 players who had to sit out due to COVID protocols. They were missing their starting goalie, their third goalie, one of the top forwards, and freshman forward. They ended up having to start the game with backup goalie Matt Murray. I think Minnesota Duluth probably realized it was a bad omen to have a goalie named Matt Murray play against them in Pittsburgh. You think? Who was phenomenal, and the most interesting roster change had the Minutemen having to dress their student equipment manager as the backup goalie for the game at a Final Four game. Do you believe that?
Oh, yeah. And it in that game, Minnesota Duluth, their backup goalie, their normal number 2 goalie, was also out for COVID protocols. And the backup goalie for them was a third goalie who hadn't played a game in over 2 years. So it would have been interesting if both of those guys had ended up in the game.
22-19 to score.
It would have been interesting. But again, going back to what we were saying earlier, this is what COVID has done to did to college hockey this year.
Well, I think the 2 games in the Frozen Four were probably the best part of it, as Saturday's final was very, very anticlimactic as UMass defeated St. Cloud 5-0 as they controlled the game from the opening face-off to the final horn. The highlight of the game happened partway through the second period when UMass was leading 2-0, took a penalty, which with a goal would have brought St. Cloud right back into the game, but UMass penalty killer Philip Laganov took the puck, did a howdy doody on St. Cloud defenseman, and scored a back-breaking shorthanded goal with a beautiful deke. Basically sealed the game. So congratulations to the University of Massachusetts Minutemen, who won their first NCAA Division I men's hockey championship in the NCAA, and its member school for being able to play a season during the craziness this year that is COVID-19. The games went off without a hitch. Teams that should have been there weren't. But to go in there, to me, UMass was a complete underdog in this whole thing. To me, they had no business getting as far as they did. And to win it all, kudos for them, Peter.
Oh, absolutely. Like you picked Minnesota State to win. I picked Minnesota Duluth. And, they dominated that semifinal game against UMass, dominated it. And they just couldn't. You know what's funny? I'm watching the game. It's like you were talking about the goalie, Matt Murray. I thought that before the game. We're in Pittsburgh. Matt Murray's a goalie. The chances of Minnesota Duluth winning were slim. And that kid played terrific. He got them to overtime. And then, like you said, in overtime, it looked like the team switched sweaters. UMass came out, they were just balls to the wall, and they went for it, and they dominated play and scored the winner.
Well, I think it's awesome, and congratulations to them. I wish my Michigan boys could have been there, but it is what it is.
It's also worth noting, Ed, that UMass had 6 Canadian players on the team, and I think that's one of the biggest factors that led to them winning. Including their captain is also a Canadian kid. So,
well, the projected number 1 overall pick in this year's draft is arguably going to be the defenseman in Michigan, Powers. His first name escapes me. Owen Powers, thank you. And this bothers me to even admit this, but yes, he is Canadian.
I know that kills you. It does kill you, but hey, you know what? There are more and more players coming out of California, Arizona, Florida. The game. We'll look at Austin Matthews leading the NHL in goals right now. And, he grew up in Arizona. So that says a lot about the growth of the sport in the U.S.
Absolutely. And not only that, but if you think back to when you and I were growing up in this game and we were playing in this game and trying to see where we could go, the majority of all hockey players came out of Canada. There were no Russians or Swedes or Finns or Czechs. None of that was going on. College hockey was non-existent. You never saw a kid, if they wanted to go and play in the NHL, when they left high school hockey, if they even played high school hockey, they were off to Canada playing juniors. As if you weren't playing juniors, you weren't making the NHL. Now, the U.S. colleges, they take a ton of players, and it's amazing how many are being taken these days.
It is, Ed. It's a phenomenal amount of kids who are opting to go that route. It's something I think the scouts like because you get that extra few years of development that doesn't cost the NHL team that much money. Even if they draft the kid who's in college, and while he's in college, he's there for 4 years, and you can decide at that time if you want to sign him or not. You take a kid in junior, you only have 2 years to decide. So college kid, you can wait till he's around 24. Kid coming out of junior, you got to make a decision on him when he's 20. So it makes a big difference, and the cost of development.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more, Peter. Okay, Peter, moving on from the NCAA Frozen Four, we are going today. It was trade deadline day. It's kind of my Christmas along with the draft day. I live for those days in the world of hockey. So we're going to go through 10 or so trades that happened today. Now, these are not in any specific order. There's not which one is the biggest or the worst or least or however you would. We've picked 10 plus that we're going to talk about, and we're going to do at least these 10 and then go from there. So, Peter, let's start off. The New York Islanders acquire Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac from the New Jersey Devils for Mason Jobst, AJ Greer, first-round pick in 2021, and a conditional fourth-round pick in 2022. I'm thinking the Islanders made out with this. I mean, yes, the draft pick's going back, but to me, that's some big names in hockey right there.
Definitely. I think Lou Lamoriello wants to win now. I also think it's important to the ownership of the Islanders with them building the new building out on Long Island. They want to go into that building in a year or two, with another cup in their belt, and show the people in that area they are worthy enough team to fill that building up. So Lou Lamoriello is a smart guy. He knows what his team needs. He has the freedom to do what he did. And I mean, Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. Zajac played over 1,000 games with the Devils before they got him, and that says a lot. Going to fit in real nicely in that team with the makeup of them. They're just pieces of the puzzle. They don't have to be the top of, the guys that everybody's looking at to carry the team through the playoffs. So they're part of a puzzle there, and that'll be great for them.
Well, now we got to touch on something that's bigger than the trade itself, bigger than Zajac, bigger than Palmieri, bigger than the draft picks, bigger than everything that was involved in this today. Kyle Palmieri had to shave his beard.
Yes, he did. You play for Lou Lamoriello.
No facial hair.
You play a certain way, and it was so funny after Lou Lamoriello left Toronto. The media in Toronto started showing pictures of the various players coming back with longer hair and facial hair and stuff like that, which Lou is very, very adamant about with his teams. He wants that type of discipline. You know what? He's got the resume to back it up. There's no doubt about it. So Lou knows
definitely old school.
Yep.
All right, Peter, let's move on to the next one here. Colorado is acquiring goaltender Devin Dubnyk from the San Jose Sharks for Greg Pateryn and a fifth-round pick in 21. A wash? Is this more good? I mean, is this better for Colorado? I mean, are they coming out getting a goaltender? Where does Colorado sit? I mean, I thought they were fine in net.
They are, but I think teams want to make sure. Toronto made another deal themselves, getting another goaltender. I think teams want that third goaltender, especially this year having the taxi squad. They want to make sure with all the COVID protocols, everything like that, if something happens to you, an injury or COVID positive test comes back, you want to have somebody who's capable. You don't want to be relying on your backup and a guy who's normally playing in the American Hockey League in the playoffs.
Okay, Peter, I get what you're saying. I totally understand what Colorado is trying to do here, but Devin Dubnyk, A, isn't a backup. B, he's not an American League goalie. He's up there, and he's played well and proven himself in the NHL. You're going to trade away things in draft picks for I don't know if come maybe?
Well, you know what? Minnesota moved him on to San Jose, and in San Jose, he's been splitting the net with Martin Jones. So he's kind of had that backup type role as he's on the kind of the downward spiral of his career. And Colorado took him basically for an insurance policy. And, he'll obviously get his games, but they do want to have that insurance policy for whatever could happen, be it injury or COVID.
All right, brother, let's move on to the next one here. And you and I talked about this prior to the show, and we're in a little bit of a disagreement. And part of me hates to admit you're probably right, but I still, in this instance, for the teams that we're going to discuss here, I just don't see it. It's a three-way deal between Tampa, Columbus, and Detroit. And Tampa gets David Savard and Brian Lashoff in a three-team deal with Columbus. They acquire a first-round pick in 2021, a third-round pick in 2022 from Tampa. The Red Wings acquire a fourth-round pick from Tampa in 2021. There were also financial conditions and special considerations for Lashoff as well, who remains in Grand Rapids. So at the end of the day, this whole mess is some draft picks going one way, David Savard going the other way. Brian Lashoff stays in Grand Rapids. He's the captain of the Griffiths. Tampa's got to pay his salary. Detroit gets a fourth-round pick basically for nothing, and they acquire what could be a top three defenseman anywhere else, who's, in my opinion, is going to play 5 or 6 on that team.
Well, I think he's going to play a lot higher than 5'6". He's going to play 3-4 for sure. He is quite a talent. David Savard is. It's interesting structure, as we know and talked about a few times. Tampa is right up against the cap, and this is very creative why they had Detroit involved, because Detroit is retaining 25% of what I read correctly, 25% of Savard's salary.
Oh, Savard. Okay, yeah. And Savard went to Detroit first.
Yes, and
that's
Columbus,
how the whole thing worked.
Yeah, and Columbus was supposed to retain 50% of it, which left Tampa only having to retain 25% of Savard's salary, which with the time left in the season, they'd still let some fall under the cap. For doing that, Red Wings ended up with a fourth-round pick, and Columbus, which looks to be putting himself in total rebuild, has a first-round pick, another first-round pick this year, and a third-round pick next year. So it's a good move for everybody. Like I said, wasn't a huge move for Detroit, but because they're brokering the deal, they still ended up with a pick and some and a player who they're not paying in Grand Rapids to help the team there.
So let me ask you a question. Let's go stick with Columbus here for a minute. Head coach, is he there next year? Do you see him?
I think if they could have traded him today, they would have probably traded him too. But no, I think John Tortorella is going to play his last, the team's going to have their last 15 games or 16 games, whatever they have left behind the bench with him, and then they're going to move on from him. Is he under the last year of his contract? That I'm not sure if he has this year or one more year after it, but I think it's
immaterial.
Definitely the writing's on the wall. Yeah, he's going to he's definitely going to be out the door.
All right, Toronto gets Nick Foligno in another three-team deal involving Columbus and San Jose. Columbus Blue Jackets captain. This has always bothered me. To me, that definitely seals it for Columbus, that their hands are in the air, the white flags are up. That's one of your best players and your captain. Back in Detroit's heyday, they had traded for a couple of guys on different teams during the season and the trade deadline. And both guys they got that one year were captains of their respective teams. And to me, when you do that, you're saying, okay, I'm good. We're done. We're going to throw in the towel and say goodbye. And he's been there. He's not just been there for a minute or two. He's been there for a couple of years. And I'm exaggerating. It's a lot more than a couple of years. But he's been there. And
oh, yeah.
Toronto gets one hell of a player. What does this do to boost them going into the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, this is definitely a great coup for Toronto. I mean, they picked up a proven leader, a hard-nosed player, a guy who's built for playoffs in Nick Foligno. It's funny. They were talking a lot of rumors that he was going to end up going to Minnesota to end up play with his brother there. But Toronto stepped in. And again, being a three-team deal, Columbus ends up with a couple of draft picks. They get Toronto's first-round pick this year. So that's 2 first-round picks from other teams they get this year. They get Toronto's and Tampa's now. And then next year they get Toronto's 4th round pick. San Jose, who is basically like Detroit in the last deal, brokered the deal. They end up with Toronto's 4th round pick, but they're going to eat some salary. They're going to eat part of Foligno's salary, 50% of it. So that's what San Jose's doing in this deal. Basically, they bought a 4th round pick for, $1.3 million is what they've done. But Toronto came out a big winner in this deal. I really like Foligno. I like the game he plays. And he's just made a potent offense a lot grittier, a lot tougher to play against now.
Well, Toronto wasn't done with Nick Foligno. They went on. Toronto also picked up Calgary goaltender David Rittich for a 3rd round pick in 2022. So that's not even this season. They're doing it for next season. What does this do to bolster them in net?
Again, it's like the Devin Dubnyk deal. It's, they have Jack Campbell playing well. Freddie Anderson's injured right now, and Michael Hutchison's the 3rd. I think they don't have the confidence in Hutchison to bring along into the playoffs, and that's where David Rittich comes in. Plus, Toronto's also looking at it. If somehow or other Calgary sneaks into the playoffs, that would be their first opponent. And Rittich has shut Toronto out twice this year and beat him a 3rd time. So, you know what? That's kind of
join them.
Exactly. You know what? Take away the guy who's been beating you. You might as well have him on your team. So, I think it could have been a two-part thought process in there.
Jeff Carter to Pittsburgh. How big a deal is this?
That's you know what? I think that tells Pittsburgh fans that, you know what, guys, we're in this. We're still we think we got another shot at a cup. We're bringing in an experienced guy who knows how to win and has got a cup ring himself. And it didn't cost him a lot. I mean, it's a 3rd round pick and conditional 4th round pick.
Before you get into that, that's what I wanted you to explain. A lot of our listeners know the game and they understand the game. We have some listeners that maybe are just getting into the game. Explain to them what that means. Now, Pittsburgh got Jeff Carter from the LA Kings. In return, LA is getting a conditional 3rd round pick in 2022 and a conditional 4th round pick in 2023. What does that mean to the average fan when they're going, okay, what does that mean? The conditional. They got a 3rd round and a 4th round or they didn't. What does that mean to us when a fan says, I don't get it?
Well, what it means is a conditional pick means it depends on what happens with the team who acquired their player. So in this instance, the conditions for the 3rd round pick, they can be upgraded to a 2nd round pick if the Penguins reach the Stanley Cup final this year and Carter plays in at least 50% of those playoff games. So if both of those things happen, that 3rd round pick actually becomes a 2nd round pick for the Kings. For the 2023 4th round conditional pick, it could also be upgraded to a 3rd round pick if Jeff Carter plays 50 games next season. So if he plays at least 50 games next season, that 4th round pick becomes a 3rd round pick.
How old is Jeff Carter?
Oh, he's got to be in his early 30s.
Okay.
Early to mid 30s.
It's definitely something that's possible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He definitely could be there.
A move that probably shocks no one, except for maybe the guy that got traded, but I can't believe he would be shocked that he was sent down the road. Boston Bruins. Okay, I don't know. Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar from Buffalo for a 2nd round pick in 2021 and Anders Bjork. Now, Taylor Hall is heading to his 6th team, his 5th team. Edmonton, Arizona, New Jersey, Buffalo, Boston, New
so
Jersey, Buffalo, and Boston. So this will be his 5th team. At some point, does he got to look in the mirror? I mean, does Taylor Hall got to go, is it me? And throw in Curtis Lazar was probably going, thank God I'm out of Buffalo.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure Curtis Lazar is feeling that, especially because he came to Buffalo through Ottawa. So he hasn't, I don't even know if he's played a playoff game yet. But back to Taylor Hall, it's no secret. You don't be a Hart Trophy winner like he was a couple of years ago and then get traded to your 5th team in your 10-year career for no reason at all. And it's safe to say that, Mr. Hall maybe needs to take a good look in the mirror. There's certain things about his personality, I'm sure, that may not sit well with a lot of his teammates in the past. Hockey players are really good at keeping a lot of that stuff to themselves. But, I've been privy to a few things. He's going to have a lot to prove himself in Boston. He is he is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. He's already come out and said he'd love to sign a contract in Boston. I'm sure he would, and I'm sure Boston's going to be let's see how we do in the playoffs before we start talking about a contract extension.
Because there's some guys on that team that will not tolerate his nonsense. It will be shut down, and it will be shut down in a hurry.
Yep. Exactly. And those guys have been there for a while and have proven, as much as we joke around about BM, he can play. He does have an ego, and but he is a Bruin through and through. And if you come into that room and bring anything less than a Boston Bruin team mentality, you're going to be shut down real quick.
Yeah, and they should. Absolutely, they should. Regardless of the team you go to, you walk into that room, you better be prepared to have questions asked. Okay, why are you here? Why are you on your fifth team in 10 years? And I'm sure there's a lot of those guys who already know why, being in the league. So we'll see what happens. Definitely we'll see what happens. All right, I haven't said anything earlier because I wanted to wait till I got to this. You and I have discussed in length that Tampa, Florida, Carolina, they're all the teams vying for the Central Division and possibly to come out of the East. With a couple of moves that were made today, I'm giving it a 3-team toss-up, maybe a 4.5. I don't know. I haven't come to that conclusion yet, but Florida picking up Sam Bennett and a 6th-round pick in 2022 from Calgary for Emil Henneman and an unsigned junior player, Florida's 2nd-round pick in the 2022 draft. This boosts Florida big time, getting Sam Bennett. Now you got Toronto, who's making changes. You've got Boston, Toronto. Holy crap, Tampa's still there. To me, it's coming down to the team, I don't know if you want to call it the Eastern Conference or what, but to come out of there and play in the Stanley Cup, it's coming down to Washington, Toronto, Florida, and then you've got to toss in maybe Tampa, maybe Carolina. As far as I'm concerned, my pick at the beginning of all this mess isn't going to be anywhere in the running, and that was Dallas. And I really thought Dallas was going to come out of this with something to prove, and they're having a hard time getting rolling, and they're catching up on those games in hand, and they're not winning a lot of games doing it. Tampa's been on a much of a downslide lately, losing games they shouldn't be losing, starting with when Detroit slaughtered them. So they've either got to wake up or say goodbye to back-to-back cups, to me, in my opinion. Your thoughts on this pick with Florida and getting Sam Bennett out of Calgary?
Well, I think Sam Bennett pickup by Florida is good. Florida made a couple other small moves that are, to add to their depth and, that you got to have in the playoffs. When you're going every other day and you also have this COVID testing going on, you need depth. And a lot of teams, if you analyze all the trades that have happened over the past week, and especially like the last couple of days, a lot of depth moves were made by a lot of teams. And Sam Bennett came into the league with a lot of offensive promise that hasn't really been delivered, but he's shown that he can be a hard-nosed player who's going to chip in. He can be a solid third-line, second-line player, but his knock in Calgary has always been consistency. Now, if Joel Quenneville can get that out of him in Florida, that's going to be a huge, huge advantage. But going back to what you were saying about Dallas, they've been snake bit between the COVID issues and the injuries. And being in the Stanley Cup final like Tampa, they had the shortest layoff of any of the other teams. It's been a battle for them. They really didn't. I don't think they made any trades at the deadline here. I think they're licking their wounds. and they're going to run with what they got. If they sneak into the playoffs, great. And they're right there. They're right at the door knocking. But it's still going to be a battle for them to get in. Carolina didn't make any deals either. And I look at Carolina as a very, and they have been for the past few years, a very, very tight team. And I don't think they wanted or saw anybody that they could bring in. I'm sure they kicked the tires on a few players with a few teams, but didn't see anything that was worthwhile to disrupt their dressing room.
That's what I was just going to say. Yep.
To bring somebody in. Now you go back to the other team you touched on, and Tampa. They made that the one big deal for David Savard. But as you and I talked before we started recording here, the one huge asset that Tampa has that they are going to get back in time for the playoffs looks
Didn't cost him a thing. Mr.
Kucherov, who just happens to be one of the top, if not the top player in the league these days. So I mean, let's give our due to Mr. McDavid, but as far as leading a player to Stanley Cup, that would be Mr. Kucherov.
You got to give kudos, because you talk about what Detroit used to do in the 80s and 90s and finding these little gems, these little diamonds in the rough in the third and fourth and fifth and sixth rounds. And Yzerman snatches up Kucherov in the fourth round. This guy's a stud. I mean, he's a superstar, rock star hockey player. And he was drafted in the fourth round. How many teams are kicking themselves in the arse right now going, who missed this one?
Well, and that's the importance of your scouts. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. That
you are one. That's why.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, the scouting department is so good. I mean, we had Chris Draper on a few episodes back. And I mean, I know the mileage he's putting on to see players, and he's looking everywhere. He looks under every rock, everywhere he can find a player. And that, because, you're going to get to the fourth and fifth and sixth round of the draft, and you're hoping you can find a gem. And that's what you really want to do. And it is so important. And, you can tell the teams who were perennially at the bottom third of the league year after year after year, Buffalo Sabres year after year after year, who haven't put much money or effort into their scouting department, and it shows.
Next player we're going to talk about is not that it's a big deal, not that it's a blockbuster deal, not that he's some type of superstar stud. I am shocked that Chicago pulled this, though. 28 years old, Matthias Janmark, 3-team deal with Chicago, San Jose, and Vegas. Vegas gets him. Chicago's on the bubble of the playoffs. Why this move? What do you see Chicago? What's going on there? What's going on with Captain Sirius? Has anybody heard anything more on their captain coming back, and when? Why Matthias Janmark? Why now?
Well, the Blackhawks have been kind of tailing off this last few weeks, and I think Stan Bowman's looking at they're probably not going to make the playoffs. Janmark is somebody who was coveted by a lot of teams, and they got a good return on it. I mean, they got a second rounder from Vegas for this year, and they got a third rounder next year, and that's a pretty good return. Vegas, they got to keep up with the Joneses in that division, and that's the Colorado Avalanche. And again, they look at somebody they could bring in who further adds depth to that team, which is very deep to begin with. But that's just that whole division is going to be a knockout division. I mean, we're talking about other teams. We didn't touch on this division, but it's like you wonder coming out of this division, be it Colorado or Vegas or St. Louis or Minnesota, whoever comes out of this division, they're going to be pretty black and blue by the time they get out, because that's going to be a lot of hard fought battles. But I mean, I think it's one of those deals where everybody got what they wanted. Another 3-team deal that involves San Jose. San Jose retained 50% of Janmark's contract, and for that they picked up a fifth-round pick from Vegas, which was actually Buffalo's in 2022. So again, another team that bought a draft pick for $1.1 million. So it's not a deal for them.
Just so our listeners understand, we may not have talked about it today, but we have talked about it in the past couple of shows. And Peter and I are pretty much in agreement that it's a four 4-dog or 4-pony race coming out of the West. You can throw your hands in the air as to, or throw all 4 of them up in the air to see who's coming out of there. But it is going to be Vegas. It is going to be Colorado. It is going to be St. Louis, or it's going to be Minnesota. One of those 4 got to come out of there to play for the Cup, and there's nobody else going to compete with them.
Oh, they are definitely the especially Colorado and Vegas. They're the class of the league, and anytime you get a chance to see them play between now and the end of the year, it's going to be like a playoff game. And also, congratulations going to Marc-Andre Fleury, who is supposed to start the season as a backup, and he's got the best numbers in the league for any goalie right now. So he's having a great time, and he just tied Eddie Belfour for career wins. So he's moving up the charts, and always a big smile on his face. That's a guy who loves to play the game.
Not only that, anybody that deserved to knock the chip off of his shoulder is him, because he wasn't wanted any further in Pittsburgh. Said, you know what, we're moving on. You're old. And what does he do? First year in Vegas, takes him straight to the Stanley Cup Finals. And he's doing it again this year. And he's playing lights out. Kudos to him.
Absolutely. I mean, Robin Leonard got the big contract in the off season, but then he's been hurt and had COVID, and there's Fleury going, "Yep, I'll play." Smiles and wins.
That's all he does.
Smiles and wins.
Before we move on much further, we are going to discuss what is probably the biggest trade of the day, if not considered by many to be a blockbuster deal of the season. You and I talked about this before the show, and it was so big. It's one of those that happens during the offseason at the draft, right before your draft. There's some pieces moved around, but this isn't a trade deadline deal. Washington picks up Anthony Mantha from the Detroit Red Wings for Richard Panik, Jakub Vrana, a Washington first-round pick in 2021, their second-round pick in 2022. Steve Yzerman is a freaking genius. Maybe it is part leverage. I was talking to my cousin about this, and how did he do it? Part of it's leverage. Part of it is Washington is up against the cap. They are hard up against it. They need a big power forward. They needed to dump salary, and in order to get all of that done, they're first place in their division. They're ready to win now. It cost them a first and a second, and it cost them 2 very good players, both under the age of 30.
Well, I think it's a great move by the Red Wings. Mantha has signed for a few years, so that's something Washington doesn't have to worry about. Panik becomes a free agent at the end of this year, but it's a restricted free agent, so Detroit still has the ability to match. The draft picks are great. But I think, McClellan, the GM in Washington, he's also like a few other GMs, is in a let's win now. Ovi's not going to last forever. Backstrom's not going to last forever. They're a team that, kind of like Pittsburgh, let's say we're all in. With that being the case, Anthony Mantha's got a lot of pressure on him. He can't float like he did in a lot of games against Detroit. I mean,
it's the same thing with Taylor Hall as it is with Mantha here. He's going to go there. He better be ready to play Washington Capitals hockey, because Ovi isn't going to stand for it.
Oh, no, Ovi will be ripping him a new one, and he'll do it on the bench. He doesn't care. I mean, Ovi has the Washington Capital logo on his butt. That's how deep he is with that organization. And if Mantha isn't playing a complete 200-foot game, he's going to let him know. And I mean, Mantha's getting a good payday. He's making $5.7 million a season. So it's not like they're bringing in a cheap player that they're hoping to overperform. They're bringing in a guy who's getting paid to perform to a higher level, and that's what they want to see out of him every single night, every single shift.
Now, inside information. This isn't inside, the first part of this, but this is the final year of Jeff Blashill's contract. Steve Yzerman has stood by his head coach ever since Steve Yzerman got here. He was signed to his 2-year extension before Stevie signed and became the GM and VP. Being told that he is sitting down with his bench boss to discuss the future. Now, his assistants are also coming to end of their contracts. I have no idea what he's going to do. What I do know is he's sitting down with them. Is Stevie bringing him back? Does Stevie clean a house? What is your thoughts?
My thoughts are simple. I think one of the reasons they've kept Jeff Blashill as long as they have is because they think, and he's a good teacher. He's good with the young players. He proved that in Grand Rapids, developing and winning the Calder Cup there. Even as tough as things been in Detroit over the last few years, he's still able to teach, bring guys along. I can see the Red Wings, though, for next year, their objective is we got to make the playoffs. Next year, it's we got to make the playoffs, and we're going to do what it takes. So this might be the year when Jeff Blashill is moved out of the head coaching job, but I think they are going to try to retain him in an assistant capacity because of his teaching skills and work with the young players. That would be my guess.
You really think, would you do that? Would you step aside and stay on that same team after being the head coach to be under someone else on that same team?
Yeah, you know what? If I would, and I think Blashill would definitely do that as well. I mean,
do you think it's because he's a Michigan boy? I mean, he's coached at Western, he coached at Grand Rapids, he's coached in Detroit.
No, for everything I know about him, he's a pretty loyal and dedicated person. And
I've heard that as well.
And if the Red Wings are going to show him that dedication and loyalty by keeping him with the team in an important role, and, they could keep him on as an associate head coach as far as a title kind of thing, but bring in somebody a little more proven. I mean, you got Bruce Boudreau, Claude Julien. I mean, you got some names out there who proven to be, can do it on a consistent basis at the NHL level and move the teams up to the next tier. So
you just don't want to trade with Columbus.
Yeah, we don't want. Oh, you don't want Tortorella behind the bench.
No, I don't want Torts here. No, thank you.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't Torts was with Tampa before Stevie went in there. So
yes.
That's right. Yeah,
here's one for you. Who was before Torts?
Where?
In Tampa. He was there when Stamper was drafted.
Was that Gallant?
No,
that he was in Columbus, I'm thinking. Sorry. Yeah. Who was that?
Barry Melrose was there for Stammer. He got fired for benching him.
Oh my God, that's right too. And hey, a side note on Barry Melrose. Don't know the guy personally.
I've never met him. He was a coach in Adirondack.
But I listened to him do the color commentary on the ESPN broadcasts, and comes a time a player needs to hang up the skates. Well, this is the time for Melrose to hang up the microphone. I'm not taking anything away from his hockey knowledge. It's just he's just not fluid on the microphone. I'm not saying I'm the guy either, but his time is definitely past, and it showed. It showed during those NCAA games. But
who do you see if they keep Blash as an assistant coach? So what do they do with Doug Huda? What do they do with Dan Bilesma? Do you see Bilesma taking the head coaching job, or do you see him talking to a Gerard Gallant, to a Bruce Boudreau, to a John Tortorella? Who do you see them? Who would Stevie? They got to fit with Stevie's line of thinking. So he's bragged constantly. Steve Yzerman has mentioned it. He loves the communication between him and Blashill. It is top notch. Those are Yzerman's words. They communicate well together. Who do you see? There's also thoughts that he's not going to bring Gallant in because he couldn't fire him. He's his friend,
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's just a rumor. I'm not trying to get into rumors. It's stuff that I've read that maybe that's why he wouldn't bring Spuddy on. Who do you see them getting?
Well, like I said, I think Bruce Boudreau was actually a better fit in Philadelphia than anywhere right now, because that's going to be open. So Alain Vigneault will be another guy looking for a job. We said Tortorella's going to be looking for a job. Claude Julien's out there. And there's a host of assistant coaches who will be looking for a job. I don't see Dan Balsma taking it. I can actually see him moving on somewhere. I could see Dan Balsma taking a position in Seattle. Actually, is somewhere there. It's hard to say who could end up to be the Red Wings. I do like Bruce Boudreau. I love the way he communicates with players, and I'm a little partial to him. Yeah,
I agree. I've watched Bruce up close, and I was a huge fan of Spuddy Gallant when he was a player, and watching him as an assistant coach in Montreal, and watching him as a head coach in Columbus, watching him as a head coach in Las Vegas, as a head coach behind the bench, Florida. Look what he did in Florida, and they fired him. I want to know why he can't stay, because he's done nothing but prove he can win.
Well,
period.
In Florida, that had nothing to do with him. That happened to be, and I can't remember the guy's name, but the actually had hired, what's the proper term, a donkey to be the GM in Florida at that time. Yes. They made a lot of bad moves and just brutal moves, and that's why they basically cleaned house from the GM on out. That's how they ended up with Quenneville in there and are going in the right direction. Now, Vegas firing Gallant, I still can't understand why they did that. But, he would be a great fit in Detroit. There's no doubt about it. But like you said, if there's the issue of him and Stevie being too close, yeah, I can see that being an issue.
But I would definitely, if who's available right now, Bruce and Spuddy would be my top two choices as far as that goes. Hey, we could both be a mile off, and he could sign Blashill to another 2 or 3 year contract, and he has proven he can win as a teacher. He's done it in Central. He did it in Grand Rapids. For me, I think he's a great guy, and I think he's a great teacher, but too many players, to me, and Stevie disagrees with what I'm about to say because I heard him say it today, but I don't see players progressing like they should. In fact, I've seen a few players go backwards, and I don't know if that's because of the talent around them, if it's what he's teaching, but you got, like you said, they want to make the playoffs next year. You got Joe Veleno possibly playing in games this year. You've got Gustav Lindstrom going to be playing in games this year, who's been brought up. Smitty has been brought up. The monster stud defenseman who's playing over in Europe, who's in the playoffs right now, and the number 6 overall draft pick 2 years ago, Moritz Seider. Right. He's going to be here next season, and he's going to be ready to take jobs. So all of these guys coming in, and don't forget Lucas Raymond. He's going to be here next year and ready to play. You've got all these guys coming in. You've got Dylan Larkin. You have got Bertuzzi, who is probably done for the season. Bobby Ryan, he's supposed to be back next year, even though it's a 1 year contract. Will he be brought back? Robbie Fabry, he's got to come back. So you've got guys that are going to be ready to play next year. Can Blashill take them? Does he give them another 1 year? We'll have to wait and see. What I know is they're sitting down at the end of the season to discuss it.
Well, just further on that, Ed, one of the reasons why I think they won't, and that happens to be part of the Anthony Mantha equation, is he can teach, and he's great at teaching, but he's not holding the players accountable for the way they play. I think
you know what? You're right and you're not right, but here's what I'm going to argue with you on that. He doesn't hold them accountable, everybody. He did certain players. He would bench them and sit them. Other players, he wouldn't. Do you know who else did that? And it was a huge controversy, and he lost his job because of it, and ended up winning the Cup in Montreal.
Gosh, we're going way back now, aren't we? Oh, man, you're just pulling these guys out of your ass today.
You ready? Yeah. He was in St. Louis. He was in Detroit.
Jacques Demers.
He was in Montreal. Jacques Demers. There you go.
Yep. Jacques Demers.
So, he didn't hold guys accountable. The whole thing that happened in Edmonton with Peter Klima and Bob Probert, other guys that were with him got benched, didn't play in the playoffs, but he couldn't sit those two guys because they were his studs in the 80s. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I like the guy. He communicates well, obviously. Is he the guy to take him to that next level? Not in my opinion, but you know what? I don't get the big dollars. Stevie does. He's the one that makes those decisions. So
that's right.
I'll leave it to him to do that, and I'll just give my little 2 cents and be done with it. Anything else you got to touch on?
Well, one more thing, Ed, is especially for our American listeners, they might not understand. You take the deals Toronto made, for Nick Foligno, it's a great example. Vancouver made a deal. Calgary made deals. Those players who go into Canada, it used to be 14, but they have to quarantine for 7 days before they can even start practicing and playing for their new team.
Yeah, there were some deals made before the deadline just because of that. But the ones that were done today, they can't do squat for 7 days. Nothing.
Nope. And that's, so you take a Nick Foligno, he's got to get to Toronto and then sit in a hotel room for 7 days and wait. He can't even go and work out in the gym or anything. So that's going to slow him down a little more.
It will, but wherever they're quarantined, I'm sure they're not sitting on their butts doing nothing. I can tell you that.
Well, there's not a lot to do. You watch TV, you play video games.
True, but you got to have something in the room to keep them working out or their hands doing something. Anything else, Peter, you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
Oh, that's it, Ed. I think it's going to be a fun run to the end of the season, and God willing, hopefully the playoffs go on without a hitch and Canada loosens the borders so that we don't have to have a bubble set up for the Final Four or anything like that.
Not only that, let's hope that everything is back to some type of status quo next season and all the borders are open, whether it's the U.S. and Canada, the Europeans, anything that we can get these players back and forth, get a look at players to get drafted for 2022, all that stuff. Because we got a draft coming up with a lot of players that nobody's seen for over a year. So
that's right.
We do hope you've enjoyed the show. If you have, please click like, please click subscribe. Got any questions on your favorite team? Send them off to us. PuckHeadsInsider@gmail.com. Check out our Facebook page, Puckheads Insider Report. Today's show has been brought to you by the Florida Grow House. You ever thought about your own greenhouse? Well, here's your chance to get one. Have your own healthy, organic, fresh, and delicious fruits and vegetables in your own backyard. Just go to floridagrowhouse.com or just call 772-249-2095. Mention you heard this ad on Puckhead's Insider Report. Get yourself a $750 discount. My name is Ed Combs. I am here in South Florida. For my co-host, Peter South. He's in Windsor, Ontario. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to talking hockey again with you next week.